You're watching 13 WMAZ Law Call, sponsored by Macon Law Firm, Reynolds, Horn, and Servant. Your rights, your calls, live. This is 13 WMAZ Law Call.
Well, hello and welcome to Law Call. I'm Morgan Dukes, your host for tonight. And tonight we're talking about a subject that most people have been involved in, car and truck wrecks. Now, if you've had a little fender bender or maybe you bumped into something around the house, that's one thing. But sometimes you need to call in a personal injury attorney like Mr. Wendell Horn of Reynolds, Horn, and Servant to help you out, because sometimes we get into these accidents when we actually need an attorney. Isn't that right, Wendell?
Morgan, that's absolutely correct. Unless it's just a minor fender bender, I would go in and talk to a lawyer that handles these types of cases, mainly because, number one, it's not going to cost you a dime, and it'll give you good information to let you know where you stand legally when you're dealing with the insurance company, even if you don't hire a lawyer. So there's nothing to lose and everything to gain by going in and sitting down and having a free consultation. And most any lawyer that handles wreck cases will do that for you.
Well,
and we have tonight with us to assist us in answering questions, my partner, Marty Sin. Marty, glad to have you on board with us tonight.
Good to
Hey,
be
Marty.
here. Hey, how are you?
Good. It's good to see you. It seems like it's been a while, especially with the onset of COVID and everything and what we've been through for the past year and all that's been going on. It's good to see you again, and good to see you well too. And both of you, you look great.
We're trying to stay safe.
That's important. That is important. So tonight we're talking about car and truck wrecks, and yeah, they do happen. So let's get to our first question, our email question that came into us. And this is a question that a lot of people have a concern about, and it's from Sherry. And Sherry's question is, when you're in a wreck, how soon should you start talking to a lawyer? Do you need to make a report with the insurance company first? Or do you need to call that lawyer first? What should you do, Wendell?
I would call a lawyer first. You have an obligation to report it to your insurance company. No question about that, but you can call a lawyer immediately, discuss the facts of the case, and get the information you need to deal with your insurance company.
Oh, well, see, now that's good information, because I did not realize that you could call your attorney right there on the scene of the accident. I'm seeing more and more of that now in television commercials or perhaps on a television show. But in reality, a lot of people are not thinking about their attorney right then. They're thinking about the police report and, exchanging insurance information, and all of that's going through their mind. They're not thinking about calling an attorney. They're thinking, oh, we'll get to that tomorrow. But it's important to do it even at the scene of the accident.
Well, no, not necessarily. In fact, I would not necessarily recommend that. I'm talking about shortly thereafter, after all the dust settles, you find out who's been injured, what's happened, assess the situation. I would not be overly concerned about calling a lawyer from the scene, even though you do see that promoted by some of the TV lawyers. I mean, that almost looks like you're super litigious. I would wait, see what happened, talk to the police officer, let everything calm down, and maybe the next day call a lawyer.
Oh, okay. All right. Now, speaking of being on the scene, Marty, what do you think about this idea? A lot of people take photographs of their accident, and not only do they keep those photographs, but they put them on social media. I see a lot of that. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I think it's a really good idea to take pictures of your car and the scene if you're able to do that, if you're not injured to a point where you can't do that. In fact, there are some wrecks, big truck wrecks, 18-wheeler wrecks, where they will have their defense attorney on call, and they will be on the scene before the scene's even cleared up. So it is a good idea to take the pictures. It's generally a bad idea to put those on any social media, because as soon as you get an attorney involved, and as soon as they find out you're represented, they're going to be the other side's going to be digging, seeing what they can find, and it could be completely innocent or just an innocuous picture, but it's going to be something that they may be able to use out of context, and so it's just not worth the chance of them, the other side, getting any kind of ammunition to use against you. Generally, it doesn't hurt anything. But I have seen it come up where pictures are taken out of context and used against somebody for reasons that the picture was never intended. So it's just a good idea to stay away from that, I think.
I've seen that. I've seen a lot of that. It's not uncommon at all to get on social media and see accidents of people and, different things. And, I often wonder, maybe you should have held that one just a little longer. Now, our next question deals with something that happens behind the wheel of the car that may not necessarily be your fault. This question comes from Vance. And his question is this: I heard about a wreck where one driver had a heart attack and they lost control and crashed into somebody else. Now, if something like this happens because of circumstances that you could not control, are you just as liable as a driver who had a wreck because they were texting or speeding or something like that? So, Wendell, what say you in a case like this?
If it's an act of God, you had not had any forewarning that this was going to happen, then you're pretty much excused from any negligence and responsibility you might have for that accident. However, if someone was having chest pain, had a history of heart problems or arrhythmias, a history of blacking out, and in spite of that continued to drive without caution, then that's a different story. But still, that's not as bad as someone that's speeding, texting and driving, on the phone and driving, and just generally recklessly driving. So yes, indeed, if it's an act of God, you passed out even from a seizure and had no history of seizures, if you could establish that, then, it's going to excuse you from the consequences of it.
I never knew that. Because, I guess there's some attorneys who would say, no, you're still responsible regardless. But I didn't realize that it would excuse you if it hasn't happened before.
Well, actually, we were talking about stories. I tried a case that's been in probably the last 5 or 6 years where a young girl talked about having a seizure, and that's what caused her to have the wreck. And that was the defense that was presented to the jury. And in fact, it looked circumstantially like she, in fact, did have a seizure. And that it was a bad collision. The impacting vehicle that she hit rolled over and was injured, and we represented that plaintiff. And as we took depositions, we found and learned that this was not her first seizure. She also testified that she had an aura that gave her a forewarning before she had a seizure typically. And she testified that she had that aura before this impact. And instead of stopping and calling somebody to come look after her or take her car and drive her to wherever she was going, she continued to drive, and sure enough, she had the seizure, and the jury held her accountable and responsible for that. So that's what I'm talking about. It's depending on the circumstances. If she had never had a seizure before, riding along, had no notice before the accident that she was going to have one, and just blanks out and has a wreck, then she's probably going to be excused legally.
Okay. Wendell Horn and Marty Sand are our attorneys tonight. We're talking about car and truck wrecks. Ooh, most of us have been there at some point or another, but when we come back, we have more email questions for you. I'm Morgan Dukes, and you are watching LawCall.
You're watching Law Call on 13 WMAZ with personal injury attorney Carl Reynolds, who has recovered more than $500 million for his clients, dedicated to helping injured Georgians for more than 50 years, plus support from his Macon law firm of Reynolds, Horn, and Servant, including attorney Wendell Horn, focused on protecting the rights of car and truck wreck victims across the state, and attorney B.J. Servant, aggressively representing those injured by medical malpractice, hosted by award-winning broadcaster Morgan Dukes, featuring guests from across Middle Georgia. Your rights, your calls, live. This is Law Call on 13 WMAZ.
And welcome back to Law Call. I'm your host, Morgan Dukes, and tonight we're talking about car and truck wrecks. Unfortunately, in life, it happens. And if you happen to have been a victim of one and you need a good attorney, well, I got two with us tonight. We have Wendell Horn and Marty Sin from Reynolds Horn and Savant. And gentlemen, thank you, first of all, for being here tonight. And I know you have some more good answers for the people who've already sent in their email questions regarding what to do in the case of a car or truck accident. So if you're ready, Marty, I'm going to hit you with the next question, okay? The next question comes to us from Paula. And Paula wants to know, she says, my cousin was hit by a tractor trailer 2 days ago. Do they need a special truck wreck lawyer to handle their case? Or can any lawyer do it? I don't really understand how to tell who does what between the different kinds of lawyers. And Marty, to be honest with you, I think that's a place that a lot of people get when they're in an accident. They don't always know who to call first or what type of lawyer. They just may have heard of a family lawyer or somebody that the family uses. So why don't you explain, who should they call and, I guess based on what type of accident they're going to be in?
Yeah, I think this is a good question. And it's an area where people need to be really careful, because the short answer to that is any attorney who does injury work will take your tractor trailer case, because those cases are usually larger cases that have big injuries, because it's big impact, it's big trucks. But the client does need to be careful with the attorney they choose, because just because an attorney will take that case does not mean that they're necessarily the attorney for that case. Trucking cases involve very specific regulations, different kind of violations. Over-the-road truck drivers and companies are heavily regulated, and there's federal codes that govern their activities. So an attorney who's not familiar with those regulations and those codes can easily miss certain aspects of the case. I have the perspective of actually having done both sides of this. Early in my career, I did defense for trucking companies, and I was able to kind of learn a lot about those regulations, and so kind of have a knowledge in that field. And now I represent parties who've been injured by those truck cases, and it transfers over well. But someone who doesn't have that experience and might not necessarily know all those may miss something. And it gets very complicated. There's experts you can hire that can help you determine all kinds of things with these accidents. These trucks have black boxes on them, almost like airplanes do, and you can get everything down to when that truck applied the brakes, whether he had his blinker on, when was the last time he stopped. And so if an attorney doesn't know you can get all this information, he may miss that. So it is very important to make sure you're picking the right attorney. And there's, like I said, every attorney would take that case, but there's only a handful of people that are actually probably qualified to do that. It's a very specialized field, and it is important to make sure you know who you're picking.
And let's be clear, the Reynolds, Horn, and Savant definitely takes those types of cases. Am I correct?
We have a lot of those cases, and every attorney here is well versed in handling those cases. We have relationships with those experts I was talking about. They're accident reconstruction engineers. We hire them. We work with them all the time. We have developed relationships, and that's certainly something that we do.
Okay, I wanted to make sure.
That kind of goes back to, how do you go about selecting an attorney? The last place I would look would be TV. Mm-hmm. I would go, if you don't know a lawyer that actually handles cases like that, I would recommend you go to any lawyer that you have a recommendation, a relationship with, that may be a business relationship, domestic work. If they don't do it, they will refer you to a lawyer that they know is competent in that field. That would be a better way to go about selecting a lawyer than just whoever I saw on TV. Talk to a lawyer if you've got a close relationship. They will put you in the right hands. Okay.
And that's important to know too. And thank you, Marty, for bringing that out, that not every attorney knows about 18-wheeler activities. So, that's important to know. All right. Our next question comes from Shona. Shona wants to know, if you're in heavy traffic and you pull onto a busy road and another driver waves you in like it's okay, we've all seen that, right? But you actually get hit. Can you sue the first driver for telling you that it was all clear? What?
No, actually, you're probably going to be sued yourself. And if someone waves you through a line that was created, a gap that was created from a line of cars, and you're waved through, you have the responsibility of making sure the lane you're turning into or going to go across is clear. And if you don't make sure of that, and you have a wreck, you're the one that's going to be responsible for it. You can't sue the driver that waved you across.
Oh, well, thank you for clearing that up for us, Wendell, because we always like to, make sure we have a place to place the blame, if you will. And if someone invites you to come on in, you're thinking that it's a good way to go, but unfortunately, nope.
You're responsible for looking for yourself.
So if you're driving, all right, drivers, if you're behind the wheel of the car, you definitely have to stay focused. So don't you find yourself in a situation where you're in trouble. Okay, listen, we're going to go to break, but when we come back, we got more questions that we can get these wonderful attorneys to answer. Wendell Horn, Marty Sin, both of Reynolds, Horn, and Savant, excellent personal injuries attorneys. If you need a personal injury attorney, when I come back, I'll have details on how you can get their information, give them a call, get a free consultation, and of course, get your questions answered on a personal level. I'm Morgan Dukes. Stay with us because you're watching LawCall. And if you have further questions for either Wendell Horn or Marty Sin, both of Reynolds, Horn, and Savant, you can find them right here in Macon at Reynolds, Horn, and Savant. The phone number is 478-405-0300. You can also reach them on the web at www.reynoldsinjurylaw.com. And please don't forget to follow Reynolds, Horn, and Savant on social media. You can find them on Facebook. Good information there, Wendell. Good stuff there about some of the cases you guys have been working on and some of the things that have been happening with the firm. So you all check that out, Reynolds, Horn, and Savant. All right, Wendell. All right. And Marty, it's good to have both of you with us tonight. We're talking about car and truck wrecks. So let's get back to our questions. I have a question here from Charla. Charla has a question about an 18-wheeler. And you guys, by the way, for those who might be just tuning in, you guys do handle 18-wheeler cases. But Charlotte's question was, I was hit by an 18-wheeler truck while sitting at a red light, and he was making a really wide turn. Am I to blame for not giving him enough room? His insurance guy actually tried to tell me that. That is such a frightening place to be sometimes when they are making that turn and you're sitting there and you're wondering, are they going to make it? Are they going to make it? Or are they going to hit me? So who wants to take this one first? I mean, is she to blame if she gets hit?
Marty, you want to take that one?
Sure. This one could be a little bit tricky, but I would say generally, no, she's not going to be to blame if she gets hit, as long as she's in her lane behind the white bar. She's not out into the intersection. The truck drivers have a heightened duty of knowledge, and they're trained on these trucks, and they know they make wide right turns. And in fact, they have to take tests for a commercial driver's license, and a lot of these trucking companies send these drivers to school, so they learn that they're how they have to navigate this. And so they're charged with knowledge of knowing where their truck is and how they have to turn. So if she's sitting where she's supposed to be and a truck hits her, she's not charged with any duty to know how this truck is going to turn or operate. So I would say that is not something that she would have to worry about. I think that would be the insurance company trying to create a defense that I don't think is necessarily there. Now, if she happened to be in a place where she shouldn't have been, too far out in the intersection, something like that, then they may have some kind of contributory defense. But as long as she's where she's supposed to be, I think she would be okay.
Okay. All right, Wendell, any thoughts on that?
No, I agree with Marty. It's a different story if a truck is in the process of making a wide right-hand turn and swings out, and then someone is moving and drives up at a fairly good clip of speed and then gets hit, even though they're in the lane, there's definitely going to be some contribution on that driver. But if you're sitting still and you're hit by a moving truck, I just don't see any defense to that.
Okay. All right. Now, speaking of 18-wheeler trucks, here's a thought. Why is it that we never ever hear about anything happening to the driver of that truck? Many times you'll often hear about the victims, you hear about the accident, but what happens beyond the accident to the driver? And why don't we ever hear about that? I mean, do they ever get charged with legal issues, or do they go to jail for, an accident, vehicular homicide case? Whatever happens. Any thoughts on that?
Absolutely. I mean, the problem, if you're in control of an 18-wheeler, you're usually in control of a 50,000 to 80,000 pound vehicle riding down the road. And if you're in violation of a lot of the statutes and requirements that are placed on you, you have a wreck and you kill someone, there's very much and very often going to be vehicular homicide charges coming out of that. So yeah, I mean, you don't hear a lot about it because usually it's after the fact, after the investigation. But there's a heightened duty if you're a tractor trailer truck driver to drive safely because of the consequences if you're involved in a wreck.
Okay. And Marty, do attorneys seek after these type of cases, or do they really like working on these type of cases?
Truck cases? Sure.
Yes.
Kind of like what I was mentioning earlier, usually these cases are big, high-profile cases. There's usually a lot of damages or unfortunately fatalities, and the verdicts that come from these types of cases are often large. So, I think a lot of attorneys who are in this business, if this case found them into their office, they wouldn't turn that case down. But like we said earlier, it's also something that these potential clients need to be careful about because, just because that attorney is willing to take it doesn't necessarily mean they know all the ins and outs of it. So yes, I think any attorney would want that kind of case.
And not just for the high profile value, I would think. I mean, that if you are seeking an attorney, I would definitely recommend Reynolds, Horne and Savant, because you did bring up some things earlier that a lot of people just don't know. There are certain components of a big truck accident, like the black box, for example. That's just one thing. Most people don't even realize that those trucks have that as a part of them. So most people don't understand that.
That's right. And that's why these cases take a long time to develop too, because there's a lot of things you can discover off of these trucks and a lot of expert testimony. So that can get complicated.
Okay. All right, then. Well, listen, I want to thank you both for being with us tonight. Car and Truck Works is what we've been talking about. And if you have further questions, by all means, reach out to Wendell Horne or Marty Sin at Reynolds, Horne and Savant right here in Macon, 478-405-0300. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us tonight. Okay.
Good to see you, Morgan. Glad to be here.
All right. Until next time, from all of us here at LawCall, we bid you a very good and safe night. Good night, everybody. Have a great night. See you next time.
Good night.
Bye.